affected, and I'll start with you, Nerima, is the high rate of pregnancies. Young girls who are pregnant, and in some counties, according to the newspaper yesterday, like Narok, you have a rate of about 40% of school-going girls becoming pregnant. Again, this is an issue that one needs to find out, where did we lose the plot? Where did the rain start hitting us?
I think we need to ask, is the problem that the girls are pregnant, or is it the problem that we have young girls having sex? Because I think that in our country, and I mentioned this last week, we do not quite have one, sex education. And number two, a lot of those cases we're seeing that there are older men impregnating these girls. It's not the same age.
It's not necessarily their classmates.
No, it's not necessarily their classmates. So when we have older men with younger girls, then we do have a societal issue, because now we are talking about it being against the law, because your partner is below the age of 18. They are minors. But we also see in some areas in our cultures where it can be looked at as consent, and we see even families marrying this young girl to this individual. And that is worrying in itself. But also the fact that we have high numbers and high cases is an alarming thing, and we need to first investigate as to why we have such a high number, and number two, find out, for instance, why they are coming from certain communities. It's not the whole entire country where we are having pregnant girls in school. And secondly, we are not even conversating about the fact that it is evident with a girl because she's pregnant. We're not even trying to focus on whether these young boys are also practicing it. And it means that it's unprotected, which means we're seeing a rise in HIV in counties like Bungoma and Busia, where we're seeing new cases of HIV coming in amongst our teenagers. That should be the conversation.
That should be the point of worry. All right,
Yes.
Mamboleo, are you concerned or worried that we have a very high rate of young girls getting pregnant in school?
I'm extremely concerned about very underage girls getting pregnant, because this means a number of things. It means that most of them probably will not even continue their education to a level that can be useful to them. It is one big factor in considering when you look at how these people are going to end up eventually. You know, we have seen many cases of young girls being married at a very young age. And then they are, of course, directed out of school and so on and so forth. Let's put it this way. Research has shown that when a girl starts engaging in family affairs of that nature that early, there's a likelihood that they might not rise to their fullest potential most of the time. And I don't think that these girls are any exception. But what is the real cause of these problems? It is, in my view, probably a cultural question. It could be a societal breakdown. There's something we call anomy, breakdown of norms, breakdown of rules. You know, a society that is not held together by some values. You have teachers. You have teachers prowling all over for young girls.
Some of these girls.
You have men who are much older, and of course who are expected to know better. Relatives. Some of these relationships are incestuous. I think what we were saying earlier is that this society that is called Kenya needs to start understanding that it's important to go back to those values that we used to have as a people. You know, the framers of the 2010 Constitution thought that probably if they elevated this idea even to the level of the Constitution, that they could help. If you go read Article 10, national values, you know, that these things could help. But now that we have that problem, I think we need a multi-stakeholder approach to giving a solution. Probably there is a role that churches can play to educate everyone, you know, that it's important to allow these girls, or it's important to desist from doing some of these things. As she said, it is not just the girls who are doing these things. It means that probably the boys are also doing it, only that you will not see the symptom because they do not become pregnant. We also have a role that the education sector, the school can play. And we also need to put in place a curriculum on sexual education so that children know from very early on that, you know, This is what this particular process means, and this is what it could lead to, including uncalled for pregnancy and so on. And then we have what government can do from the Ministry of Education. It is also a policy question. We need to understand, for instance, what the Ministry of Education or what policy the Ministry of Education has with respect to dealing with questions of early pregnancies in schools and so on and so forth. So let everybody play a role, and let the enforce, and you know there are laws against pedophiles and so on. Let the police also make sure that they effectively enforce the laws that exist. Let these people who, let these cases be investigated appropriately. Let those who are found to have committed such kind of crimes be brought to book, and this is going to act as deterrence against any other people who might also want to do something. So I won't say that there is a one-stop shop where you can find a solution for all these problems, but I think it is a multi-sectoral approach that we need of a lot of people.
Honorable Mtambo, some of the reasons why I think we should be concerned about this is, one, you've got the health of these children, because they are children, to be concerned about. Number two, there's their education. Like you've mentioned, some of them may not really pursue their education to a point where they would want to. Number three, the fact that it's illegal. We do have some of them who are minors, whether they are having sex with other minors or with teachers or people who are older than them, it's still illegal anyway. How do we deal with this? Again, this is in a country that claims to be 80% Christian.
You know, we are only looking at the schools. But my take is that what you are seeing in schools is a reflection of what is happening in our society. How many young girls who are out there and they don't go to school and they don't pregnant and it's not mentioned? How many of them? And that leads now to my answer that we really have a societal problem in our country. And it is in terms of so many other things which make this happen. We cannot say it's only in school. We cannot say it's about the teachers. We cannot blame the parents alone. We cannot blame the government alone. It's a collective responsibility for each and every one of us as Kenyans to address this issue. And even the service providers, for example, those who provide internet, like almost every household, there is a phone. And in that phone, there is a data. And in that data, you can access many sites, including pornography sites. And that child is exposed to that. And I can tell you, a 5-6-year-old child, today they know how to use a phone, and they'll dig into those sites and they'll find these materials there and they'll see them. I like what they did in Dubai and other countries. There are sites which are banned. And I think now that is where the law comes into play. Because if today you impose a law, or we try to say there are some, if you are supplying, or if you are a service provider and you are giving internet to any household, or you are a mobile operator and you are giving and you are selling data to any telephone, you must make sure there are some sites which are blocked, which nobody can access, like pornography sites. And Kenyans will come out and say, no, it's my phone, it's my right, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't matter whether it is your right or not. It's a matter of life and death to our children and to our society. But those are the things we need to look into. Because so many other things are exposing our children to danger of having sex when they are so young, because they are learning them. You know, you don't do something which you don't know. You only do what you know. Once you learn how these things are done, bet you me, you will do it tomorrow. And, of course, it doesn't matter with you, whether with a old or young or whatever. And at that time, once you do it and your time is ready, you'll get pregnant.
I'm not sure that legislating and blocking sites is going to help, because even if we look at it in terms of value system...
Let me tell you.
Hang on. If we look at our value system, look at corruption, for example. That we have enough laws, we have enough institutions, we have enough regulators and, you know, people who are supposed to deal with it. Has it stopped it? No. We've talked about sex education, which again is something that when there was this AIDS scourge, there was a lot of money poured into sex education, into letting people know. Has that stopped it? No.
No, let me tell you, it works. It will work. And we cannot say that our laws are not being enforced, and we cannot say that they are not working. They are working. It is only that we have a culture. And what we are creating here and what we are doing, we are injecting that culture of understanding what is sex and how sex is to young children or to people who are not supposed to. That's why you see even in films there is a classification that this film is not supposed to be watched by under this age.
All right.
That caps this kind of attraction.
Okay,
And
Mamboleo, do you
exactly
think that
about.
adding laws is actually what is going to be our solution?
I wouldn't, for instance, I wouldn't say that, I am not so sure, because that's research probably that needs to be done. I am not so sure that blocking sites from certain people is going to lead to any less of these cases that we are seeing. But I think that just like in many other societal problems, the solution cannot be just one. The whole idea here is to reduce the exposure of young people to those issues which would lead them to thinking that probably having or engaging in early sex is probably the good thing to do. And you know, Mike, even your TV stations are some of the greatest cheerleaders of some of these things which are very attractive to young people. Your press, your TV stations, and your print media does a lot of exposure of, I think, celebrities. You know, we see so many people who call themselves celebrities, the kind of life that young people are yearning for, and for all purposes, you would think this press or these media stations are moving on the principle that nudity sells, you know, because they are looking for sales. I do not know, because they are looking for business. This is important, that every person needs to do something to make sure that young people are not being exposed to the idea that having early sex is a good thing. If you are parents at home, you're supposed to make sure at home everything that is happening, you know, parents are supposed to make sure that they know where their children are all the time and what exactly their children are doing, because that's why they're children. You do not want a situation where for 1 hour you actually do not know where your kid is, okay? If these children are in school, whoever is responsible for these children is supposed to make sure that they know what these kids are doing. So not necessarily blocking these sites from everyone, but making sure that young people or people who should not see these things are not seeing them. And then coupled with proper training. You see, it doesn't help too much if you block these sites, but every time the kid or your kid takes your phone, they find that this is what exactly you've been watching, you know? We also need to lead by example. Adults need to start giving or role modeling their children to move in a certain direction or to behave in a certain way. Don't do those things which you do not want your children to do. These public displays of affection, people are making out in public places or in places where children are going to be seeing them, and generally not leading to, not directing these children in a manner which will make them grow in the correct way. I think it is extremely important, and as I said earlier, this is not something that you can solve by doing something at Parliament so that there's now a law which says you can't do this or that. There's a role that government will play.
Multifaceted
There's a role that the enforcement agencies are supposed to play.
And even homes.
There is a role that parents are supposed to be playing. There's a role that church will play. There's a role that school will play. Everybody needs to come together. But I think what we need to do is also to elevate this conversation to a higher level so that people understand that it's something urgent that we need to do. Believe me, it is not the case that the fight against HIV/AIDS did not yield any results. In fact, today, Mike, that intense fight against HIV has reduced the rate of infection and so on and so forth. And people are able to live a lot better with HIV than before. So these things do help. It's important for campaigns like this to happen.
To be done.
To run campaigns in schools, in churches, in every place where young people are told, hey, hold a minute, you are going to be alive for a long, long time. Get to an age where you are able to determine responsibly what kind of sex to have, with whom, so that you do not affect your life prematurely.
All right, and that's, of course, a conversation that will continue, but let's now move on to other things that took place this week. We also had the president in China. Nerima, maybe your expectation of China, I mean, China has been a discussion for a long time, and we are hoping that this time round, according to what the president had even said before he went to China, is that Kenya is positioning itself to benefit basically between the relationship between China and us. Of course, we do know that there's been quite a number of issues that have been raised previously with the Chinese, of course, coming and taking jobs here, to the extent that some of them were even apparently roasting maize and selling jobs that can be done by Kenyans. But your expectations on Uhuru's trip to China and what maybe we should be looking forward to gaining between this relationship?
Well, China is very far, and I wish that there were fewer trips to China and things that could be discussed if it was on one trip, to be frank with you. Because if this travel, I would hope that he's going to renegotiate the agreements that he's already made, including the comment that he had made about the fish industry and our businesses and protecting the Kenyan people. Because I think we are all aware about how Chinese do their business. They're very clear in that term. But then what we need to be more concerned about is our president having our interests? And is he going to push forward the Kenyan people's interests, not necessarily more development, requesting for more funding and more loans? Because where we are right now, even looking at the housing tax that they're putting on for the Big Four agenda and seeing that the Kenyan people have to pay for it from their salaries. And the repercussions are very harsh, where if you don't or refuse, it's 2 years. So when it comes to taking from the people, we have very strict, harsh regulations, including not paying taxes. They're very strict, and when it comes to collection, it's very high. But then when it comes to accountability, when we talk about the fight against corruption, we have still not seen any convictions, even of high-profile cases. So for me, I would like to say that out of this meeting, I'm hoping to hear that these are some of the renegotiations that we have had. These are some of the terms that we have had, including when we're talking about the SGR and involving more Kenyans, or even, I think there's a bit of tension between our relations, because we saw even on social media how a Kenyan citizen stood up to a Chinese because, and I've had people who do work with Chinese saying there is a cultural barrier where they technically behave that way and behave in clusters and prefer to work with their own. Then how will that be when you're living in our country? So how are we going to be able to say that we have a relationship that is cordial, where we know that it's a business negotiation,
and where
but
we're
able to
benefiting
live?
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, where we're benefiting. Honorable Mtambo, your expectation of Uhuru's trip to China?
You know, I know, pardon me, I know President goes out there not for his own sake, but for the sake of the country. And that is where I differ a little bit with Rema when she says, I hope. I want to tell you, don't hope. That is the truth. The president has got no other business apart from representing his country, because we elected him to do what he's supposed to do. And going out is one of his business, because you need to run a country. We need technology in this country. We need partnership in this country. We need so many other things. And I think you'll bear me witness.